Father, thank you so much for the opportunity for giving me a couple of minutes to talk
Yeah.
about this project. This probably an unusual conversation, but let me start by asking, what was the scope of your role as a consultant on this film? Were you involved throughout the whole process, or only during specific phases? Did you work directly with the director, the cast? How was that collaborative process like?
Yeah, I was a lot more involved than I ever thought I was going to be. So
Okay.
in the beginning parts of the preparation for filming, I was very involved in aspects of the script,
Mhm.
particularly aspects that revolved around rituals. So the mass, the exorcisms themselves. They would send me copies of the script because obviously there's elements they would have to shorten for the purpose of the theater, and so they would send me elements and say, is it okay if we omit this, or is this something we need to include, that kind of thing. Um, I made recordings of the Latin text for actors, and then once we were here, um, I was on set pretty much every day. Not for the full day, but I was there every day, and I would observe and provide my commentary. I met with all of the lead actors individually and also as a group during lunch.
Mhm.
And I was also involved with the props and the costume department. So,
Okay, interesting.
they would come and bring things to me, and sometimes I would look at what they would bring, and I would try to politely say, "Well, no, that's not actually something we would wear," or that kind of thing. Um,
Okay.
and I would make recommendations. One thing that's I think is really cool for me is, this takes place in 1928, and so, for instance, in the mass scenes, the vestments that are worn are actually vestments that are from the 1920s, and
Oh,
so there's little details like that I was able to be involved in.
that's interesting. So I find it very intriguing how religious themes, particularly exorcism, this type of what that film portrays, are addressed in horror films to generate fear,
Mhm.
tension, sometimes even repulsion. So few of these films explore these topics from a more serious, dramatic, mature,
Mhm.
educational perspective, perhaps within a different genre that provokes different emotions. How do you see this usual Hollywood or mainstream media trend from a religious perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll admit I was originally skeptical of being involved
Hmm.
because of what you're saying. I
Hmm.
I don't think that exorcism in the church is always portrayed in a very good way on
Hmm.
screen. Um, I imagine that because of the way ratings work, this is technically rated as a horror film.
Hmm.
But viewing the film, I don't really see it that way, right? I don't
Okay.
see this fitting in with like The Exorcist and that kind of thing. I think the exorcisms in this movie are a necessary part of the plot,
Mhm.
but that the larger story is really about these people who are involved in it. And I think that's what makes this movie different. And that's the one of the reasons I was willing to be involved is I felt like exorcism wasn't being treated as just sort of a prop here, and the church wasn't
Agree.
being treated as a prop. That we were looking at this is something that's real, and so it's something that has to be
Yeah.
done respectfully.
That's what I loved about the film, the way that it portrays the flaws of the characters.
Hmm.
They're conflicted, they have their doubts, and they have their crisis, their faith, the crisis within the faith. So that to me was very, very, very interesting and very well portrayed in the film. So did you ever feel conflicted while working on this project, given your religious vocation, and how did you reconcile those probably conflicts, emotions, or tensions?
So once I agreed to be involved, I never felt conflicted.
Mhm.
But my conflicts were more early on before I had had a chance to see a lot of the script and talk to
Okay.
people.
Mhm.
I will admit that when they sent me the final copy of the film, I was really nervous to watch it because I didn't want to watch it and be like, oh, I hope I don't regret this. But when I watched it, I was like, okay, no, I'm glad I was involved. I think they do a good job.
Uh-huh. Interesting. So, do you think that this type of films will have a negative impact in people that maybe are not that religious and push them probably away from church?
A negative impact? I don't know. I mean, I imagine not this movie particularly, but I do think that a lot of movies that sort of make a caricature of the church and the faith, can have that effect on people. Um, but I don't, like I said, I don't think that's what's happening here.
Mhm.
Ultimately, what I've been telling a lot of people is the story I think this film tells
Mhm.
is the reality of what the church is. That
Okay.
you're dealing with people, priests, sisters who themselves are struggling, but are able to kind of come together through their struggles to bring about a good in this woman's life that they wouldn't be able to do on their own. And, even leaving exorcism out of it, that's what the church does every day, right? In every city where there's a church, that's what happens, is you have a community of people who themselves are struggling, who themselves are broken, but through grace are able to come together and bring about good. And so I'm hoping that, people of faith and people without faith can view this and hear that message, right?
I agree. So we tend to believe sometimes that there's this perception that priests or pastors don't consume traditional media or don't have
Yeah.
fun, and that's not true, obviously. So what type of shows or films do you like to watch in your probably?
Oh yeah, that's great. So I'm a huge Star Wars fan. So I just finished watching Andor, and I'm ready to watch it with someone else.
Awesome.
I get a lot more into TV shows than movies. I'm a big fan of Breaking Bad, Lost.
Emma?
Y lo almost lost.